Hi everybody, this is Jack. I thought I would give you a little talk about my first car, which happened about 50 years ago. I had finished going to college and had a reserve obligation and had to go to drill meetings, and I figured, well, I don't have a vehicle, so somehow I have to figure out a way to do that. So I looked around in the classified section of the newspaper, which was the way you bought cars back in the day, and this was 1963. So I was looking for something that was reasonably priced, and I found a 1950 Dodge, and I really don't remember how much it was. It wasn't very much. I went to the house where the Dodge was advertised, and the owner said it wasn't there. He also had a 51 Chevy for sale. But the problem with the Chevy was that it had had a cracked engine block. Evidently didn't have antifreeze, froze, and I think they repaired the crack, but those repairs could maybe not hold up. So I thought, well, the 50 Dodge sounded like a potential. So the Dodge was at the garage. So he had to call ahead to get it started, which should have raised some concerns on my part. But being a young guy, new in the experience of buying a car, didn't think too much about it. So got to the garage, and sure enough, the car was running. Seemed okay. The exterior was very good, dark blue. It was a two-door Dodge Coupe, and had dark blue. The exterior was in really good condition, with the exception of the area around where the hood ornament should be, and the hood ornament wasn't there. In fact, it looked like it had been patched there and primed, but it hadn't been painted. That was the only blemish on the exterior, and for a car 13 years old in the Rust Belt, that was pretty good. The interior was, I can't tell you how good that was. It was perfect, just like brand new. And I don't really remember the mileage. So made the decision to buy the car and got it home, and went to start it the next day. Nothing. And turned out the battery was dead. Well, the battery was dead because the generator had stopped generating probably some time ago. So off to the auto parts store with the old generator in hand. This was the middle of winter. It was not easy to get these bolts out, and it was cold, and the usual problems of working on a car on the outside. So at the auto parts store, the guy told me about switching the pulleys on these alternators to use the pulley that was on the old part, so that you were sure that the geometry was correct with the fan belt. So, and sure enough, he was right. The pulley was different on the new model, the reconditioned one. The old one fit just perfect, and worked well. It was generating, no problem. So I got some use out of the car. It seemed to work pretty well. We had one little incident though. The tires were not good. They didn't have much tread. So one day I was taking my folks down to see my grandmom, and sure enough, it had snowed, and enough to obscure the limit of the road on the side, so you couldn't tell where the road was ending and the berm beginning. So sure enough, the right front tire slipped off the roadway. It's a two-lane road, and I turned the wheel and overcorrected, as many new drivers do, and zipped right across the road. And turns out that there was a hill on the other side, and that stopped the car, and essentially no problem with the car. It looked perfect. It didn't dent it or anything. I wasn't going very fast. And the occupants, my mom and dad, were okay. But it was a lesson that the car wasn't very stable without new tires. So we got down to my grandmom's, and no problem. And then after that, a short while after that, I started to hear a knocking noise. I can't really describe it. I don't really remember it. But I took it in for service with the local Chrysler dealer. And at that point, I got the news. Well, this car had something called fluid drive, and it wasn't the semi-automatic transmission. It simply was a fluid coupling between the clutch and the transmission. Well, actually, it was between, I guess, the clutch and the engine, so that you could start the car in high gear and put your foot on the brake, and it would stop, and you didn't even have to use the clutch, but to change gears you had to. So if you were content in starting in high gear, you had a car with automatic transmission, a one-speed transmission. However, that was extremely slow. It was a heavy car, and it was a flathead 6, and you wouldn't be going anywhere with that in high gear. So the alternative was to shift the car normally and just forget about the fact that there was that fluid coupling. And well, anyhow, we're at the dealer, and he's looking at the car, and he's saying, bad news. The engine seems to have a problem with the bearings, and that's not good. And this car is 13 years old now. And also, we have a problem with that fluid coupling. I never heard of a problem with the fluid coupling, but sure enough, there's a bearing in that was needing to be replaced. So here I am, faced with probably a bill higher than what I spent in buying the car in fixing it up, and having a car that was 13 years old, and with the prospect of having to buy 4 new tires. I decided that my experience with this car was coming to an end. So I decided to trade it in, and that was my next car, which happened about 2 months after buying this first car. This next car was a 1963 Dodge Dart. And so that's going to be the subject of my next video. But it's an interesting experience. And you know, if I had known as much as I know now, which is still not an awful lot mechanically, but I would have investigated getting another engine, and or maybe rebuilding that one, and maybe finding another coupling, and probably gotten the repair done fairly cheaply. But having to do it at the dealer would have been very expensive and not worth it. So I gave up on that car pretty early. It would have been nice to have kept it if it had been running right, and it would be a keeper, kind of a neat old car. But it was not to be, and I think that probably happened to an awful lot of people with their first cars. The virtue of this car was it was rust-free and in good physical shape, body-wise and interior-wise. But mechanically, it needed work. So that was the story of my first car. Bye-bye.